starting actually right now. So
Okay, great.
I'm speaking here with Dr. Tobias Siegfried, who's talking to me from Switzerland. And I wanted to welcome you to our Aral conference, Toby, and to thank you for spending this time with us. Can you just tell us a little bit about your background and what you do to get us started?
Yes, thank you very much, Mike. This is exciting to be part of this conference and part of this important topic. Well, I just recently founded my own company together with my two business partners here in Zurich, Switzerland, and we basically provide intelligence for environmental change problems. What I've been doing before, I've been working at Columbia University at the Earth Institute. I've been working at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. I've been studying at the London School of Economics and Political Sciences, and I've done other studies at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. So quite confusing, but basically I'm an environmental physicist with another training in international relations and with a great interest of how environmental dynamics unfolds within social and population pressure, climate pressures, and how we can devise some strategies for better future development.
Well, I'm sorry that you're no longer close by at Columbia, but good luck with your venture. And I was just curious, what kind of work have you done that pertains to the Aral region or the region in Central Asia that we're interested in?
Mm-hmm. I've started working in the region mainly on institutional problems 6 years ago. Okay, and there we were looking at very specifically at the history of the upstream and downstream conflict in the Surdaria Basin specifically, and even more specifically between upstream Kyrgyzstan and downstream Uzbekistan. Why did we look at that? Because we think that in many ways the Aral Sea problem is as sad as it sounds, but it is one of the biggest environmental disasters, ecological disasters of the 20th century. And since that disaster happened, the problems have actually shifted upwards, upstream. And so this is where you find, I would say, interesting conflict settings right now. And what we did is look at the history of the post-Soviet period of the last 20 years, and then started to come up with some modeling framework of how the institutions were performing. That was how we started off, and lately we sort of shifted our attention to integrated modeling in order to quantify and assess the climate impacts in the region, especially again in the Sud area. And what we're doing now is we're doing a similar kind of study for the Amud area, where you have even more significant problems to come.
And so what are the issues for this region from climate change?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's definitely two big drivers. There's one is population pressure, and another one is climate change. But the region faces numerous other problems. For example, extremism, religious extremism, then economic deprivation because of soil degradation, and large interannual and intraannual variability of the availability of water resources. Then, as I said before, population pressure, and another one is, as I mentioned before, climate change. So, if we talk about climate change, we should always put it in context with the other stressors. And I wouldn't say that, given our findings from our studies, that climate change is going to be the game changer in the region. Definitely, climate change will be felt in the region. And how will it be felt? There are three things which are important. One, the runoff regimes of these largely glacier and snowmelt-driven rivers, so that's Surdaria and Amud area, they will change. The seasonality will change. So the runoff will come earlier in the season, the peak runoff, and then in the downstream, there will be, especially in the unregulated catchments, there will be less water available for irrigation. So that's one, certainly the most significant impact, which I would say. the glaciers are not going to be contributing much because, I mean, often you read these days that, oh, the glaciers are gone, that there will be one big desert. That's just not going to happen because, first of all, they have to go. And so when they go, when they melt, then they provide additional runoff. And this melting is going to happen over the next 50 to 100 years. There's still going to be glaciers. They're so high up there in the Central Asian ranges. But even today, the glacier contribution to runoff is only in the order of 2 to 3% of total runoff, and that's it's really not a game changer. So, um, what can be an important implications of vanishing glaciers? That's the destabilization of slopes because of permafrost no longer gluing the loose pebbles together, and so you can have landslide, increasing landslide problems. And what is another issue is that the glaciers, the retreating glaciers, leave behind this unstable terrain, these terminal moraines behind which you can have some meltwater accumulating, and if these kind of lakes spill over for whatever reason, then you can have a devastating impact on the downstream in the immediate catchment. Um, so that's what I see as the big three issues if we talk about climate change. But it is my humble opinion that the region is facing even greater problems than climate change.
And you mentioned the game changer. What do you see as the game changing issues?
The game changing issues, yes, well, I see more of the political economic challenges which can really, uproot these kind of current economic systems and as they are. Because think of it, if you what you witness now is especially in the downstream. I mean, the Aral Sea is polluted and poisoned, and there is a toxic dump and a lot of salinity accumulating, and sort of the problems migrate slowly upstream. They've already reached to a certain extent the oasis very close to Fergana Valley because there you see a lot of soil salinization and with impacts, negative impacts on agricultural yield. This impacts welfare, and this can further destabilize society. And then the society is there, and if they're already, fragile because they are not having proper or some population segments, especially the young ones, do not see themselves really in the position of being adequately empowered, so as to self-fulfill their dreams and wishes. So it can all sort of lead a little bit to a to a tipping point, which I think climate change and its impacts on water might play a role, but it's not going to be the game changer, as I said before, in the sense that everything will be dry and there will be no more water for productivity, as is normally, so as you normally or often read. The game changers, they're being, or some of them are being built right now. This is going to be Kambarata 1 and 2 in the Sud area, and Rogun power station in the Amud area. These are kind of game changers. These are large dams in the Sud area and the Amud area. And if they're being built and closed, then there is a real potential for conflict. I mean, as we see that already now, the discourse in Central Asia is all about the development of new hydropower resources. And
Just explain for people listening where those are and who's downstream from them and what the nature of the
oh yes,
conflict they
yes,
create.
I can quickly describe that. So the Soviets in Surd area in the 70s, they closed the Toktogul Dam, which is one of the largest reservoirs in Central Asia. They, together with the Toktogul Dam and the Narin Surdaria Cascade, which is a sort of cascade of smaller dams downstream along the Narin Surdaria River, just before the river enters Uzbekistan, that's in the Kyrgyz territory, they planned to also build Kambarata 1 and 2, which is upstream of Toktogul. And there, the idea was to sort of produce hydropower at the same time while still being able to store water in the Toktogul reservoir and then release it at the perfect time um, for covering downstream irrigation demands in the summer. And so that never got built because the Soviet Union ran out of cash. And so these republics, they are now trying to develop to its fullest potential this vast hydropower resource of Central Asia. And Kambarata 1 and 2, these are two dams in the Sud area, which are significant dams. And Rogun Dam is one big significant dam on the Vakhsh tributary to the Amud area. And that too would, turn the Vakhsh cascade into sort of a multi-reservoir cascade. And from my perspective, it all makes sense. These are, look at Tajikistan, which is currently a poor country, but it has the third largest hydropower potential of any country in the world. So it has a totally legitimate demand to develop these resources. But the problem is that the development of these resources in the upstream poses, or at least makes the downstream perceive that this can lead to a threat of their water supply, because the downstream, they have no water. They're producing very little runoff in their territory. All the runoff is really produced in the wet upstream republics, which you could also call water castles. And these upstream republics, they are ultimately, on the long run, these are the guys who have the energy and the water. And obviously, this is also a sort of a very unpleasant scenario for the downstream, because it is a source of power, also this water. So the downstream really fears that the development of these resources can lead to a significant deprivation of their or decline of their ability to control the water game in Central Asia. And so once these dams are built, or once a big investor jumps in, and this can be anybody from Iran, Russia, China, or some multinational consortium, there is really legitimate fear that the interstate relations will further deteriorate, as they really year by year have been deteriorating.
So to come back to the climate and the glacier melt and the issue of water availability, what I hear you saying is that this is an important issue, but it's overshadowed by the political issues of damming the rivers and by the kinds of consequences that diminishing water would have, whether the source of the diminishment is climate or whether it's dam building or whatever causes it. The net effect is the kind of turmoil it would cause in Uzbekistan. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I'm saying that there is a significant potential for conflict growing, not out of a rational, rational perception, because normally when you build dams, you add options, but out of the very fact that the decision making, as in many other places in the world, is not necessarily always following rational sort of discourses.
Anything that you would like to add as we move to concluding our conversation?
Let me say it's probably one of the most fascinating water-stressed region on the planet with regard to the distribution of water in time and in space. And it's definitely one that will see significant challenges coming up. But it's, again, not necessarily from the climate change perspective. So put that into context. I'm not saying that it's not important, but we have to be open to also other dynamics. And there, I think it's really the political dynamics which are much more important. The interstate relationships, which determine any future, whether it's peaceful or conflicting, there in the region. So that's my sort of assessment of the situation.
It also, I think, explains the kind of work that you're now doing, dealing with the issues of security as they relate to these water issues. Anyway, thank you very much for adding to our conference, and good luck with your work. And we'll be talking. So thank you, Toby.
Sure, sure. Thank you, Michael.
Okay,
Thanks.
okay. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye bye.